I used a little bit of social media in my sermon preparation this week, asking on our Baldwin First site what words people associate with Mary, and also asking on my own personal page for images that people loved of Mary. And I got a couple of smart alecks who put, there's one with Mary holding some Uno cards, Mary, did you know? And my literature teacher friend posted a picture of Mary, Queen of Scots, to make sure I knew that I had not specified which Mary I was asking about. But beyond that, I got some really amazing artistic renderings of Mary, the mother of Jesus, including one in which Mary's arm is sort of raised in a fist, and the words of the Magnificat are surrounding her about God who raises up the lowly and lays the proud low and feeds the hungry and sends the rich empty away. And there's this sense of a revolutionary Mary that I really, really love about that image. And likewise, in the words that people shared on our church page, there was some about gentleness and meekness and humility. There was also some about bravery and courage and a strength of faith, because it is indeed a brave thing that Mary does. We have this annunciation, not unlike other annunciations we've seen in the Bible, even last week where we saw the annunciation which comes to Zechariah first, much like it's Abraham who's first told that Sarah will conceive. But this annunciation comes directly to Mary. And it comes with a sign that she hasn't asked for, right? She doesn't say, God, how do I know this is true? But the angel offers her one anyway, says, you'll know this is true because also your cousin Elizabeth, who has been barren her whole life and is now really too old to bear children, is in her 6th month of pregnancy. And you'll be reminded that nothing is impossible with God. I was telling Gary in between services that all week long I've had in my mind the Rodgers and Hammerstein, the fairy godmother song in Rodgers and Hammerstein's Cinderella. Impossible for a plain country pumpkin to become a golden carriage, right? There's this sense of believe in things that don't seem possible, that comes even before Mary expresses any doubt. She has some questions about the how. I don't know if you noticed, but Gabriel's answer is rather vague, right? We still don't get an answer to the how of any of this. Only that the Holy Spirit will take care of it. That God is able. And I am continually astonished by Mary's answer. Here I am. Here I am. Let it be with me according to your word. Remember what Moses does when God calls out to him from the burning bush? Moses has all kinds of arguments about his speech impediment and why he's not the best one for the job. And we've got that Jonah fellow. He didn't argue with God. He just ran the other direction and put an entire ship full of sailors in peril. Jeremiah says, I'm too young. I'm just a kid. But Mary responds, here I am. Let it be with me according to your word. What a powerful example of saying yes. And then she goes to visit Elizabeth, to go be with someone who understands what it is to be experiencing this completely unexpected and joy-filled pregnancy. To go to someone who knows what it is to be living the impossible. And when she does, Elizabeth hears her greeting, and not only is she filled with joy, but it says that the baby in her womb leaps with joy. And in this moment of the baby in her womb leaping with joy, the Holy Spirit works, and she becomes aware of what God has done in Mary's life. And so she begins their time together by recognizing what Mary is experiencing, by giving thanks that God would send the mother of her Lord to her house, that they might greet one another. And they share in this beautiful moment of rejoicing with one another. If you Google, there's a couple of really great art images of that meeting, of the two of them greeting one another and laughing in delight at what God is doing in them and through them. But when she gives thanks for the honor of having Mary in her home, Mary responds with an outpouring. It's almost as if she can't stop the praise from pouring out of her mouth as she gives thanks for what God has done. Now remember, Mary is at this point still so early in her pregnancy that it's unlikely that she's visibly pregnant. It's unlikely that she can feel the baby move. And already she's giving thanks in the past tense for what God has done. He has brought honor to the lowly and laid the proud low, has fed the hungry and sent the rich empty away, has brought salvation. There is something to Mary's ability to know what it is that God is doing and to count it as done. That is, for me, the thing that makes Mary spectacular. The way in which she seems to know the very heart of God. It's interesting to me that Luke doesn't tell us why it is that Mary has found favor in the sight of God. Why it is that now, after so much time, God has found one in whom God is willing to place God's own self in the Son, in her womb. But there is a telling parable in the book of Matthew in which a rich landowner, gives a talent to each of his servants and leaves town. And one goes and invests it and is able to multiply it, and the other is afraid and buries it in the ground. And we often tell this story when we're talking about financial stewardship and when we're talking about economics and when we're talking about how we steward our financial resources. But I believe 100% that parable is also about how we know God and who we know God to be. Because when the landowner returns, the one who has buried the talent says, "Oh, I know that you are greedy and you won't accept back a penny less than what you left me with, and so I buried it to keep it safe." And the landowner is angered. Where the other servant trusted enough in the mercy and compassion of the landowner to take a risk. Investment is always a risk. And to take a risk to do something that would allow it to grow, knowing that it might not, knowing that things could go wrong, and trusting in the mercy and compassion of the landowner if everything went south. And I wonder if perhaps what earned Mary favor in God's eyes is her ability to know the heart of God, to see what it is that God is doing in the world. Her Magnificat suggests that Mary understands on a deep level the scriptural story of who God is, as one who is steadfast in love, slow to anger and abounding in mercy, filled with grace and compassion for those God has created. And when given the invitation, and I believe with all my heart that it was an invitation, Mary's response, knowing what God is doing, is to say, "Here am I." That's one of my prayers for my own spiritual life, is that one day I might know the heart of God well enough to count it done, to proclaim God's goodness in the past tense, as if it has already been accomplished. And it is one of my spiritual goals for myself to be able to see that work happening and unfolding around me and to say, here am I. Let it be with me according to your word. And I hope that's one of our goals as a congregation, to be well enough spiritually attuned to the heart of God, to proclaim God's praise for what God has already accomplished and what God will do as if it's already done. And to look at the community around us, at the world around us, and to see God at work, and to answer God's invitation to be part of that work, as Mary has done, by saying, here are we. Let it be with us according to your word. Thanks be to God. Amen.